Fawn is going to lead us through this mini training about building relationships and talking to elected leaders.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks so much, Adam. I am hearing an audio delay, so I hope that other folks can hear me okay. I'm going to jump ahead to these slides. Uh-oh, something happened to my screen share. Hold on. I feel like this meeting has been like all the technical difficulties that you can have rolled into one. It's really great. Okay. View the slideshow. So we have got a couple, every time I switch to the slideshow, it jumps back to the beginning. All right. We've got a couple of special guests on with us today. So I also want to welcome Tiffany Gladney from the North Carolina Rural Center. And I'm also going to try to bring in Greg Borom from the phone, and I'll call on you, Greg, when we get to more of a sharing piece of this presentation. So if you can hear me, be ready. I'm going to jump right into it. First of all, I want to make sure that you're aware of NC Child's Advocacy Toolkit. It's on our website. I made a short link so that you can just type it right in. But as we mentioned about the other items today, we're going to be sending you a follow-up email. So this link will be in the follow-up email that we send out. So you don't have to worry about taking notes or anything, and we'll send this link out. But this is where you can find this information that I'm sharing, and hopefully some other things that'll be useful too. So I won't spend too much time on this, but just to refresh our memories, Adam was talking about this earlier. This is the North Carolina General Assembly. We have House and Senate represented. There's 120 House members, 50 Senate members. And you know, this graphic that I'm showing you is from 2020, the balance of power in the House and Senate, where you can see that there's a slight majority to the red, to the Republican side. Last year's graphic is pretty much the same as next year's graphic. Nothing much has changed. So we're still going to have Speaker of the House Tim Moore. We're still going to have Senate President Phil Berger. So, you know, if you want to get a bill passed in the General Assembly, you're going to have folks from both parties, probably. You're going to have to be able to get it through with a majority of votes. So more than 60 votes in the House, more than 25 votes in the Senate means, you know, working with leadership, working with folks from both parties. And if you want to know about who represents you, I saw some questions about, you know, who won their races and things like that. Again, we'll send these links out afterwards, but you can find election results for your county at the State Board of Elections website. That's where, you know, you can look up your new House members, your new Senate members, if that has changed. And current legislators are still serving through the end of the year, and you can look at the General Assembly website to find your legislators. That link is there too. And once we get to January and the new legislators are sworn in, that's where you'll be able to go to find their contact information. So I'm sharing that as sort of a perennial link that you can use to find them. So you may be able to guess, we're really trying to push you to get connected with them, stay connected with them. It's really important. So, as you're thinking about building relationships with your legislators and about, you know, what you can do to do that, you need to think about, like, how much time do you have to make an impact? So I wanted to share this graphic from our advocacy toolkit. When you don't have as much time, you can still do some of these lower impact activities, like, you know, sending a form email. Like when we send you an action alert, that's a form email that you can fill out and send in. It takes 2 minutes. It's not that it has no impact, it's just not as personal. So it's on the lower end of impact, but it only takes 2 minutes, right? You can use social media to connect with your elected officials, follow them on Twitter, follow them on Facebook, say hi, thank them for what they're doing. It's low impact, but it is a good way to sort of start that relationship or keep in touch. If you have a little more time, you can pursue some of the things on this medium impact list. So for example, pick up the phone and call, definitely higher impact than filling out the form on that action alert. And you know, having a relationship with them also means that if you do pick up the phone and call, they might actually know who you are. If you call to say, listen, I don't want you to vote yes on that bill, that's going to have a terrible impact in your district. Here's why. It gives you a chance to be more personal. Some other things on this medium impact list that we're happy to support you with too are writing a letter to the editor or an opinion piece. I'm kind of laughing to myself because last night we were doing a media relations training for some of our team, and we were talking about like who reads the newspaper, right? Who reads the opinion section? It's like your grandma, kind of. It's older folks who read those things, but legislators do. They do read the newspaper. They do read those opinion pieces. They need to stay in touch with what's going on in their districts. So this is a great way to get the message out a little more broadly, but also make sure it's getting in front of them. And we have a worksheet for creating your letter to the editor or creating your op-ed in this advocacy toolkit. So it's like a Word doc that you can fill out and use. And we're also happy to help you if you're working on one and you need, another set of eyes on it. And then attending town halls hosted by elected officials is great. Higher impact issues, higher impact activities. And these are also things that we're really happy to help you with. Schedule a meeting with your legislator. Right now, I do not recommend that you go down to the General Assembly building. There are COVID protocols, but they're maybe not as strict as some of the other places you would go. And it's better to just do things by Zoom. We are finding that some legislators are very willing to do meetings over Zoom. You can use FaceTime, you can use Skype, you can use a Google Hangout. So there's lots of ways that you can still have a meeting. And I don't know if Tiffany or other folks are finding this to be true, but one thing I've noticed in doing these Zoom meetings with legislators, they seem to be willing to spend a little more time than when we catch them in the building and we meet in their office and we get 5 minutes because there are 7 lobbyists, standing outside the door waiting to talk to them. When you're on a Zoom call or you're on a conference call, you have their total attention. There's nobody else there knocking on the door. So I really like doing these kinds of calls with legislators. And we really encourage you to do that. And then of course, hosting a community event or a forum. I know that many of you do that regularly. You host informational sessions about your work, about what's going on in your community. Don't forget to invite your legislators. They need to know what's going on in the district. It takes a little time, but we're happy to support you if you need our help in doing that. Connect with Adam, connect with Whitney, connect with me, and we'll help you do that. So those are some of the ways that we really, suggest having more of an impact. To stay connected, and this is, I think, important for some of the, for all of these things, lower and higher impact. Hopefully you're getting our action alerts and email updates, but if you're not, email my coworker Eva to make sure that you're on our email list. And then we could be going to your junk folder. So make sure that admin@ncchild.org is the address that we pretty much send out everything from. So sorry, my dog is barking. Put it in your address list, put it in your safe senders list so that you make sure you get those emails from us. Hopefully you do. So we're going to get into meeting with legislators, and I'm going to bring Tiffany in to share some tips. But just a couple things I want to say about this is that when you're meeting with legislators, it's not just the legislator that you're interacting with, you're also interacting with their assistant, maybe their intern. And these are people who are really important in the legislative process. So you want to build a relationship with them too. Be kind to them, thank them for their work. It can be kind of a thankless job. I will say they are underpaid and underappreciated staff over at the General Assembly. So you want to make sure that you are being kind and involving them too. And another thing I want to say is just don't assume that your legislator is an expert or knows a lot about any of the things that you're coming in to meet on. They're generalists. They have to work on a million issues: finance, budget, transportation, environment, everything you can think of. So you need to, bring the basic terminology, bring a clear fact sheet. You're the expert. They're not probably on the issue you're talking about, unless you know more about their background. So make sure that that's what you're doing. And you want to bring your personal story, your real life example about what's happening. Sharing a story is what sticks in someone's mind. If you come in, facts and figures are very impressive, charts and graphs. Everybody loves to intimidate each other with charts and graphs, and that's great. But, a personal story about how this has impacted you, how your child had to go to 7 different counties to try to find a dentist or whatever, that will stick in their mind. That you have done a good job when they're talking about a bill on the House floor or the Senate floor, and they say, one lady in my district, she had to go to 7 different counties to find a dentist for her child, right? Like, you did that, right? You did a great job. So being personal and telling those stories, I think is really, really important. So Tiffany, I see you on the line. I'm going to bring you in and see if you have some tips you'd like to share. And I know that folks on the call, you've all done this too. So drop your ideas in the chat, drop your questions in the chat, and I'm going to turn it over to Tiffany.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you guys so much for having me. And Fawn, you are spot on. And I feel your pain with the dog. My baby got neutered earlier this week, so that's why I had to turn my camera off briefly to make sure he was all right. So in that same vein, the first tip that I was going to talk about was actually gratitude, which is exactly what Fawn hit on. Not only should you thank the legislators for their service to the state, but also for the opportunity to speak to them. But most importantly, a tip that I have often deployed is for the opportunity to speak to them about whatever the subject matter is, and for the opportunity to set the record straight, for the opportunity to answer any questions they might have about whatever the issue may be. Which leads into the second tip, which is acknowledge that, we might not be on the same page about this issue. We might not agree on everything, and that's okay. Let's find where we do agree and work back from there, which is a good place to highlight where you do agree. And it's also a good place to highlight your agenda for that session. So that way they know exactly what you're working on and exactly where there might be some areas of opportunity for partnership, and you can go into, okay, well, here at the North Carolina Rural Center, our top priority is broadband and making sure that all underserved communities have access to high-speed broadband. And then that legislator might say, well, I want to work on some broadband. Do you have enough co-sponsors on whatever piece of legislation you're championing? No, actually, we don't. There's your partnership right there. So then when you go into Medicaid expansion, you already have that in with your partnership on broadband. So that conversation, valid, it's going to be a little tense, but at least you have your soft place to land with the broadband conversation. And then also do your due diligence. And what I mean by that is we call it at the Rural Center sleuthing, instead of Facebook stalking. Look up their social media, look up their recent media appearances, look up, have they written any op-eds or letters to the editor, even their campaign websites. So for example, when I first met Donnie Lambeth, he told me my most important title was Paw Paw. If you know my name, just call me Paw Paw. So I knew then this is a family man. So when I was at March of Dimes, I knew I could go to this guy about newborn screening, or I could go to him about these various infant related issues. And although we might not agree on all of the language, the ins and outs, he was a family man above all else. So do your due diligence and really listen to who they are and what they're saying beyond in a professional capacity. And you can garner a lot of that from their social media. Understand that messenger matters just as much as message. So, if I'm talking to a really conservative, older person who's of the opposite race of myself, I might not be the best person to go talk to them. I might want to send my president, Patrick Woody, to talk to them because they might relate on more issues. Patrick's from a rural community, maybe it's a rural legislator. I can send them in because they might connect on a deeper level than I would with that legislator. So being okay with putting ego to the side and knowing that I don't always have to be the spokesperson here, and that message and messenger are equally as important. And Fawn hit on this as well, legislative staff. One day I was at the legislator in between committee meetings, got to talk to LA. Her member is strongly opposed to Medicaid expansion, but she has a son, the LA has a son who has a mental illness, and he can't get treatment for him because he doesn't have health care. Filed that in the back of my head. So I knew when the time was right, I could use her to possibly get to him, which sounds kind of like icky, But it's like, no, you have someone that works directly with you that is directly impacted by this issue and whose life could be impacted in a positive way by increasing access to affordable health care. So make sure that when you're speaking with, not icky strategic, yes, exactly. So make sure that when you're speaking to staff, it's not just gratitude and respect, but also getting to know them on a personal level as well. And then my second to last point, smile. It's so disarming to just smile. You know, it goes so far down at the GA just to smile at folks. I know right now things are different because of COVID, and, you know, everything is virtual, but even when you first connect on Zoom calls, and, you know, the reason I'm donning glasses right now is because you know, this being on a computer all day, my eyes now get really fatigued, but smiling, it is so cathartic. And I think it's so needed right now. So remember to smile. And lastly, follow up with statistics. Show that you're not a butthead who's just throwing stats out there for no reason. You know what you're talking about and you can back it up with facts. You know, and people often ask, how are we going to get Medicaid passed? And it's half a joke, but my grandma always tells me rest in Jesus, because that's who she believes in as her higher power. And I often say rest in the truth, and we have to rest in the truth and the facts. And the facts with Medicaid expansion are clear. So make sure that you rest in the facts and statistics. So I hope those tips help. And of course, you can always shoot me an email. And yes, I am from the North Carolina Rural Center. I will put my contact info in the chat for you guys. So Tiffany Gladney, the policy manager for the North Carolina Rural Center. So I am their primary principal lobbyist. So usually down at the General Assembly. Pre-COVID, it's going to look completely different come 2021. If I go down there, I will be in a bubble. So stay tuned.
Cool. Thank you so much, Tiffany. And folks, if you have questions or tips you want to share, feel free to drop them into the chat. I am going to see if I can unmute Greg Borom from Children First Communities and Schools in Buncombe to see, Greg, do you have any tips that have really worked well for you all in building relationships with your legislators out in the mountains? And I know you're in the car. Thank you so much for being with us, Greg.
Yeah, thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, good. I've been in and out of cell service here in rural Kentucky, so we'll see if it holds. Thanks for having me. I think both Fawn and Tiffany, y'all gave an amazing overview. I don't have a whole lot to add except to say, for the work that we do, being far away from Raleigh, this issue of everyone getting comfortable with Zoom has actually made it easier as advocates to kind of attend more statewide meetings and to also meet with legislators face-to-face during this time. We work in coalition with a lot of other organizations doing early childhood advocacy in the 18 westernmost counties. And again, the tips that have already been shared are great. Our partners have been building relationships with their legislators throughout. And so this summer, when we were needing to talk about some of the early childhood relief funding that was before the General Assembly, we were able to reach out and leverage those existing relationships to do some Zoom meetings with a few of us and the legislator. And I do think that was a great great way to connect. And I really have kind of the undivided attention of our state legislator. I will say that reaching out well in advance of any kind of issues or critical notes is so key in building those relationships and getting to know what the legislators are interested in. For us, our key focus for our coalition here is early childhood, and so understanding where they stand and what they might be interested in, and beginning to, I think, put ourselves in front of them as their go-to people for getting, a new perspective on the bill, whether or not they always agree with us or not. Being able to be a trusted resource over time is a great strategy for us. And we certainly have seen that with two of our Western legislators who have unfortunately left the session, with Representative McGrady and Representative Dobson. But over the years, we were able to kind of leverage a trusted relationship that we could always, talk to them about our concerns with different bills or issues, and know that we'd at least be heard, whether or not that made its way into the final legislation. So I feel like y'all have already given the master class on this, but I'll just add those things for kind of local context.
That's great. Folks, if you have any questions for Greg Borom, please feel free to drop those in the chat and I'll relay them. Just as we finish up this section, I want to say thank you, Greg. I know you're on the road and it means a lot that you're willing to join us for this. We asked some legislators about how they prefer for their constituents to be in touch and to engage with them. And so I'm just going to share a couple of these. Representative Candy Smith from Pitt County, she really likes it when you come to her town hall. So this is something that legislators will sometimes do, is they'll host a community event. That's a great opportunity to get your issue in front of them, to show your face, to talk about what you're doing in the community. She wants you to come to that town hall. That's what she really likes. And I think a lot of other legislators like that too. Another legislator that we asked was Representative Holly Grange from New Hanover County. And she's talking about your personal story. She wants to know that this issue is affecting you personally. She says that will get past my screeners, right? I think she means her BS screener. She wants to know how this is affecting someone personally. So if you can bring in a constituent or someone else who, this is really impacting them, that's what she needs to hear to connect with an issue. And then the last one I want to share is from Representative Greg Meyer. And so you can tell Greg is coming from an advocate's perspective here. He's like, please make a concrete ask. Don't come in and give a bunch of vague, just share the problem. I want you to ask me to do something so I can give you a yes or no. He doesn't like it when you leave the office without asking him to do something. He wants to know what you need from him. So come in with a concrete ask. And I think that's great advice as well. What I want to know now is just like, do other folks on the call have any tips they want to share? What has worked well for your organization in connecting with your legislators? And if you want to share that in the chat, that's great. And if you want to raise your hand, I can also unmute you. Any tips folks want to share?
I'll say that one thing that I found to be important in my short time already as policy director during this COVID environment is that when you're meeting virtually, it's been really helpful to legislators to check in on time and how much time they have to spend. I think you're spot on that a lot of lawmakers are really willing to spend more time talking to you now that things are virtual. And there's not so many competing priorities and folks, passing by the door and motioning and signaling them to do other things. But I think they really appreciate when we check in as we're talking about stuff like, do you have 10 more minutes, 15 more minutes, et cetera.
Great advice. I know Tiffany's jumping off. Tiffany, thank you so much for being here today. Sarah Jacobson is saying, when you go into a lawmaker's office, pay attention to what you see on the wall, right? Pictures of their family or, what schools they went to, the statues that they have on their desk. It's a good clue to know who they are and what they care about, and a great way to start a conversation. So that's great advice from Sarah Jacobson. Thank you. All right, guys. Well, we're going to send you a follow-up email. One thing that will be in the Advocacy Toolkit when you get it is a planning worksheet that actually helps you plan your meeting with a legislator. And we find this particularly helpful if you're working with maybe multiple people or multiple organizations to really plan out how's this meeting going to go. So we recommend using something like that. And it's like a Word doc that's part of the Advocacy Toolkit that you can use. So we'll share that in the follow-up. I think that's it for this training. Thanks everybody so much for being here.